Hello and welcome to Weltall podcast, your best source for everything related to Dies Irae Pantheon and other Shinza stuff, I guess. I'm your host, Senior of Whiteline, and with me as usual is Zach.
Hello.
How are you?
Well, this has been a week and a half, and half of that week was just Saturday, so yes.
Yes, pretty much. Remember the time when we thought things are not going to happen, and things
Yep,
actually do happen now.
sometimes they do, yes.
Anyway, today we are going to discuss all the news that have happened over the past weekend. We are going to go on with our anime recap that we started last time, and we are going to answer some questions that we did receive from all of you last time. We are really happy that we actually did, and we are looking forward to getting even more now that we are actually doing it. Uh, anyway, let's not spend too much time in the introduction and get to the main point of our podcast today. So, as we have been talking about for the last two episodes, Light have promised to actually start talking about Dies Irae Pantheon, which they have announced last year in May, I believe. Anyway, they actually did. They did start talking about it, and on Saturday, uh, I believe it was like uh, 12 o'clock by Japanese time. They have updated the Pantheon official website, which you can access now and be thunderstruck by its amazing visuals and sound. And
Thunderstruck is very apt. It's a
yes,
very apt description.
so we I hope we have gone past the point when we couldn't even put our impressions into words. So now we can actually talk about it. Anyway, uh, the first thing that jumped to me was the overall color. Like, uh, Dies Irae, while it does have a lot of flourish to it, it wasn't really colorful, so to say. I would even go as far as to say that it was pretty, well, not grim, but
It was dark. It was dark.
yes,
There was,
dark. It
yeah,
wasn't really a happy story. Oh,
no,
at
it
first at
wasn't.
least. But Pantheon is very flowery. Like, it's no coincidence that it is, but basically, the very first thing that you see is not even the characters in particular, but the overall color palette. Like, you have purples and pinks, and that, I suppose, is the color palette that's going to stick with us until the very release of the game and beyond that.
Well, actually, I don't know about that. I think the color palette will be very different depending on what point in the game we are.
Well, I
A
can see that
certain
point,
character
yeah. Yeah,
a certain
sure.
character has a very red color palette.
Yes.
And there was the color palette thing was also during the it was also in Dies Irae, of course, but it was during the in the Shinza Megari, in the Mausoleum of the Gods, as it's called.
Yes, yes.
Each stratum had a different color to it. So, and of course, the motif of color is very relevant to the throne. The throne is very often described as not the throne, but the world itself is very often described as like uh,
The canvas.
like a canvas, exactly. That and the god basically spreads his color across that canvas.
Yes.
So
And that's why
it's
the three colors mistranslation will never die.
yes, yes.
Anyway, the pink color of the main visual is first and foremost is due to the uh, girl on the front. So we have little to no idea who it is, but uh, she really gets the most attention when you look at the visual. And it's no coincidence from what I believe, since she is supposed to be the main heroine of sorts. And I don't remember if we have actually discussed it, I believe we did, but she has been teased to be the representative of the seventh throne, the Amaterasu, and that's basically all we know about her at this point.
Actually, there is a bit more info that Masada kind of slipped here and
Oh,
there across the
yes,
cracks of
yes,
things. For starters, back in the stream when when they first showed off Dies Irae Pantheon, when they first showed off some designs, Masada is teased that Pantheon's heroine has been described by the cast as the greatest heroine in everything Masada ever, which is a very bold claim.
yes.
And he's trying to hype us up, and it's working. But it also means he kind of has to make all that hype justified. So we're all looking forward.
Yes,
Though I should, well, I'll go into my impressions of her a little later.
yes,
And lastly, he also said that a lot of the pink you mentioned earlier is because there is actually a sakura tree in the background, and Masada
yes.
has pointed out that this tree should be very familiar to veterans of the series, and it is, and that the main heroine's pink hair also stems from the sakura.
Yes.
Now, that sakura tree is relevant to Kajiri Kamui Kagura. It is a place that is where one of the more memorable scenes of the game takes place, where the eight main characters of Kajiri Kamui Kagura meet basically after the ending of the game. When they're under the tree also near the beginning of the game, where it's autumn
Yes.
and everything is not Sakura yet, but
Yes.
by the end of the game, it's already a Sakura tree, and it's where they have like a drink,
It's in full
celebrate
bloom,
victory.
basically.
It's in full bloom, yes, and they have a drink and celebrate basically the dawn of the new world, because as you know, Sakura is the symbol of the spring, of renewal, of new beginnings. Um,
Among other things.
among many other things, yes. So, yes, that tree is indeed significant, and the fact that the new girl is apparently somehow based off that Sakura is a very thought provoking, very interesting sort of tidbit.
Yes,
But we do, but
we will go back to it later on.
yes,
Yes. So for now we will stick to the visual. So
yes.
other thing that you probably mention after it is bright red spot on the left. Luckily, we do have a lot of info on her by this point, so uh, uh, this is the truth, or Shinga, or Mifra, as we have already discussed. So, the very first of the gods of the throne, and what really impressed me about her design is that she has two-colored hair style, which really drives home the entire point of the dualism of her throne. And she also has two-colored, I'm not even sure how to call it, let's call it a sword. And as we can see on the other visual that we have got, she even has uh, the eyes of different
Heterochromia,
colors. Yes.
heterochromia. Yeah.
Uh, well, oh, I suppose we can just go and discuss each god in order. So, uh, The truth is actually the god we have got the most info this time, as as you calm down after seeing this glorious visual, you scroll down and see that we also have two different uh, mm, pages.
We got some new buttons.
Yes, we actually have buttons now. So
Yes.
the first button is the story, which has the aforementioned Amaterasu representative, Sakura tree, which I believe is kinda the throne of Amaterasu. It kinda looks like it hovers in space, actually.
Well, I guess we'll see.
Yes. So, and it had a short summary of the story, which we actually did get from the streams a while ago. So it doesn't actually tell us anything new. It's just a summary. So
It's also worth mentioning that the site's loading icon is actually the Amaterasu throne emblem.
yes, it actually has been there all along, but now we actually know what it is.
There's more to load, so we see it more often.
Yes, yes, I suppose so. So, the story mentions the structure of the throne, that the gods mm, follow each other on it, spreading their rule all across the universe. And there is an observer who appears every time the existing god is about to meet their demise. And there are a lot of questions connected to this observer, and this story is supposed to answer all of them. And that again is nothing really new, so just a summary for anyone who might not follow the streams or who might actually have never played the games before. That's certainly possible. Alright, and beyond story we have the world page, which describes the overall structure of the throne once again, and the first throne, which is basically the main discussion point for now. Uh, so it has the aforementioned Mithra sitting on the throne, literally, and we also get a short description of her rule. So, as we have mentioned on the first episode of this podcast, this throne or rule or god, they are basically one and the same, is called the dualistic truth of good and evil, Ahura Mazda. It has perhaps the very first quote by Mithra, and I didn't actually try to translate it into English.
I tried, and it's actually a little complicated.
Yes, it is. I did try to translate it into Russian, but yeah. So
Yeah.
what I got is basically everything is a pattern woven from human souls, and I found it quite beautiful.
Yes, that's pretty much what I got from it too.
Yeah.
Something to that extent.
So what I got from it is that the fact that Ahura Mazda consists of two polar opposites does not mean that these opposites do not interact. The very fact that they do interact and intermingle between each other is what Mithra apparently liked about her world.
Yes,
Oh,
and you can actually see it a lot because the fact that good can become evil, and good when taken to an extreme becomes evil, and evil when not driven to the extreme can actually become good, is something that we actually we all know a lot and like a lot about fiction in general. We see it all the time. We like these ambiguous characters.
Yes, the world of grey.
Exactly, the great world. So it's actually an interesting message saying that coming from Mifra, and it kind of made me appreciate her throne maybe a little more, even though we don't know a lot about how it actually was. Um,
Yes.
because up until now, duality, good and evil, it's interesting, but when she puts it like that, it actually adds like another layer of intricacy to the
Yes,
whole thing, and
and
it's very.
Masada himself has said actually that uh, what had been revealed of Mifra this week might actually make you think that she makes a completely different impression from what we have seen in Kajirika Kagura.
I agree, and I definitely agree.
Yes,
I definitely
and
agree.
he says that what we have seen before is nothing but just one side of hers that we have learned from the point of view of Habaki and the cult that has built the temple where her statue and the description of her throne are.
And that's actually very illuminating because we kind of been basing a lot of what we know. What we didn't have a choice. We've been basing a lot of what we know from the mausoleum and the
Yes,
Shinza Meguri,
yes.
but it's an interesting idea that like there's actually some a level of like historical bias to
Well,
the
naturally, yes, of course.
naturally, yes, but like I didn't actually think about it that much. Like obviously Habaki would have his opinion about it, and
Yes.
but like that historical accuracy thing didn't come to me because I'm not sure. We're not really sure who even built the mausoleum.
Well, we
Uh,
do have an opinion. We do know that they have started to share Hajin's point of view by the end of it, because when you get
yes,
to
he
the
has a
description
strat.
of the Twilight, you have this short addendum at the end that this is quite a boring world we live in, and because of that, we
Yes,
can kind of get the idea that
yeah,
the reason they have even bought Hajun and brought him here is because they wanted to get rid of the Twilight as it
yeah.
is.
But yes, that's a very interesting prospect, and it really puts into perspective that like some of the gods, and we could actually kind of see it as well in like, for example, Satanael, because Satanael's description in the Shinzo Meguri, I wouldn't say it's different or contradictory to what we learn of him, but he's a far more complicated character
Yeah, yes.
than what you see there. So it's it's food for thought for sure.
Yeah, the problem here is that we don't really know if it really is another side to him, or it's just a retcon that happened because Paradise Lost is so old.
Yep.
And another opinion that I have seen around is that Mifra might actually have a multiple personalities of sorts, which,
That is not impossible at all.
yes, basically because everything about her screams two sides, it's possible that she might actually have two opposite characters to her. It's actually been mentioned in the Kojiri Kamui Kagura fanbook interview, from what I believe, that she is basically a very strict person unless it's about her lover, at which point she goes full, very emotional, let's say.
Well, that doesn't exactly scream split personalities. It just screams a person who's very strict about his job, but
Yeah.
has
Uh,
like, shall we say, a soft underbelly,
yes, again,
as it
we
said.
don't really know how it all goes together. We just have these separate facts and opinions, and we will see how it all goes together in Pantheon.
Masada also, when he tweeted her image, and
Yes.
that's actually the highest definition image we have of her. You should have definitely, if you like Shinza and you're not following Masada's Twitter, then you're doing something terribly wrong. Um,
Yes.
then he actually kind of kind of showed her image and said that she looks like a court like a marshal or something like a strict kind of
Yes.
officer, which I guess makes sense, and she does have that leader position, and yep.
Yes. And I suppose uh, it's actually an interesting question what position she had before taking the throne, because from what I thought she was more of an individual. She wasn't leading any troops in the war after the throne. Like,
um, I don't know. I think the way, like, this is obviously a lot of interpretation. I don't think you'll find anything
yes,
direct
yes.
quoting this, but
It's
I
just my
always felt that she
impression.
was in some level, some like not necessarily direct level, but on some level she was involved in the creation of the throne. And it kind of sits
I
well
suppose.
With Naraka being in the position to be integrated into the throne. Um, so I always saw her as this. Now I don't know if she was in a leader position, but I do think she was to some extent part of an army. We don't know what
Yes,
kind of
yes.
we don't know what
She is
tragedy.
certainly a fighter of some
She's
sort.
definitely a warrior. You can see it in everything she represents, and I'll go into that in a bit. But we don't know what kind of tragedy broke her heart so much that she had to have developed her craving in such a way.
Yes.
But there was definitely something there. She felt a lot of guilt after killing a lot of people over the throne, and she felt she had to justify herself. But you can definitely see she's a warrior, not only because of the fact that of everyone, she actually has the largest weapon, the most obvious largest weapon, the dual blade.
Well, I'm not sure actually, but okay.
I don't know. We haven't seen Muzan's sword very yet, but it looks
Well,
like
it's
the big.
about human height.
Yes, but I think Mithra's sword like has two edges, and each one of them is about human height. So I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's not a pissing contest, I guess.
Yes.
But
Actually, an
she,
interesting topic to discuss here is their weapons and their looks in general. How what is the extent they match their looks that they had before they became gods? Like, how much did godhood change them? Let's put it
yes,
that way.
yes, and that's a topic that I think we should get into when we move on to the other characters we've seen because there'll be more points of reference. But
Well,
another interesting thing is that Mithra's sword also has the two blades are also duly colored.
yes,
One side is blue, the other one is red, and the sword is also featured on her throne emblem.
yes,
Now, if you go into her page in the site, there's a few interesting parts there. If you look at the background of the text, you can see the throne emblem there, which you can see it's like a circle with the double bladed sword in there. And
yes,
actually, we were shown or we've gotten an image in the stream of Mithra's throne, of the throne itself. You can like
yes.
see like a zoomed out version of it with Mithra with Mithra and small in the middle. But if you look at the background of the site, you can actually see it behind the
Yes,
throne emblem,
the core of it,
which
so
is
to say.
yes, no, it's the image itself. It's just not as easily visible because it's behind everything,
Oh,
but it's there.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
pretty interesting. It's not just the core. If you go into it, check it again. If you go into it and
Mm-hmm.
behind everything, you can actually see the front itself, which makes sense. I assume that as they'll go forward, they'll be adding the other gods, and then we'll be able to see all of their thrones.
Yes.
Um, but yes, that's actually a very Mithra's design is of course gorgeous. She's as beautiful as she was promised to be. I can certainly see why Naraka digs her so much. And
To the point of not even caring about any other women at all. Like,
yes, yes.
why would I need anyone else?
Yep, better make sure I can't reproduce so I don't happen to. Okay, this is going a bit too
That's some
far.
dedication, yeah.
That's definitely dedication, but yeah, that's going a bit too far. But yeah, Mifra is definitely interesting, and like we've already said, and I think this is about as good a time as any to kind of wrap up the
Uh,
discussion of Mifra and
uh,
move forward.
Before we go on, another point is that uh, the short description of her throne is basically what we have already mentioned in the first episode, that uh, every living being is split between the two polar opposites of good and evil that constantly fight each other, and even if one side uh, gets the upper hand, the system of moral values flips over and good becomes evil and vice versa. And this is actually something I can already see happening on the throne itself. These two differently colored blades are basically this system of moral values given form, and I can already see it literally flipping over every time something like that happens in her world. And that's about it, I guess, and we can go back to the main visual.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Mifra is the only god we have so far. There actually are no other pages on the website. We have the top, the story, and the world. Actually, the website did lose some things to see. We don't have the release window anymore. We
Yeah.
don't have the logo of the developer, which was super Apply before, which
Mm-hmm.
has actually uh, gave birth to some theories that they no longer work on the game and Light are now working on it in-house. And
That sounds bad.
we no longer have the emblems for Android or iOS, and people think that it might also mean that it's now a PC game, or at least well, even it does remain a social game, it can still be on a PC through different platforms like DMM and such. But I actually think it's not that deep.
Yeah, yeah. People are just. I also think that people are going to conclusions. If it was, I'm pretty sure that if Light would have sacked Super Athlete, it would have gotten some kind of news coverage.
Yes. So I think they just kind of forgot to put it back after they brought this glorious visual and such,
Yes,
and we will see it back in due
though I
time.
will say in their defense that I can kind of understand the paranoia because of all the radio silence, and Light have been giving kind of signals on Light Cafe that like
Yes.
development isn't as going as well as they thought it was. So I can kind of understand the. It's not. I wouldn't call it like tinfoil hat paranoia, because there has been some worrying signs here and there. But I do think that if like there was a break between Super Aptly and Light, we would have heard about it.
I would say that when we don't get that much news uh, about the game, people just have to mull over each and every minute detail we
Of
get,
course, of
and
course.
that's how we get theories like that.
Yeah.
So, anyways, going back to the visual, we have the second god, which is remorseless, the Muzan, and this is actually pretty funny because now that we have the visual, I have to reprogram myself to uh, get rid of all the impressions I had from the silhouettes over this year.
Definitely, I think his design change was the most drastic one. My first design was also very different. Though I guess it kind of makes sense. I guess that the mausoleum was very much made in like the image of well, it was definitely made in the image of Buddhism and in the image
Yes, you could already
of
see
Ajahn.
that while comparing the Dies characters to their
Yes, not to that
representation.
extent. Actually, with Mari and with the DS characters, it wasn't as drastic. And Satanea looks like Sephiroth, so you just did Sephiroth. But
Yes.
but Muzan in Shinga, it's the most pronounced change because Muzan is a lot younger.
Yes, actually, I did know that he is going to be younger because Masada did mention it on his Twitter when we got the silhouettes, but I actually thought that these little barbs near his chin that actually come from his sword, I
Would be a
basically
beard.
thought it was his beard, yes, like a goatee of sorts. But he does not have any beard at all. And now that I go back and see the silhouettes, I can actually see that his chin is pretty visible actually. And the only reason I see his beard is because I expected it to be there.
Yep.
And now I have to live with the knowledge that
He's a lot more.
he's
Yes,
as
he's
smooth as a baby's bottom.
that's a good one. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, Muzan's design was very different. We do finally get the first look at his magnificent sword,
Yes.
which we've been oogling ever since the silhouettes came out.
Yes. I'm not sure we can say anything about it at this point, besides the point that it's very obviously cross-shaped.
Yes, yes, it is.
And
Uh,
as Paradise Lost has a lot of Christian imagery, it makes sense
Judo
for him to.
Christian imagery. Yes.
Yes, it makes sense for him to have a literal cross as his weapon. Although I do believe it's not a cross as we are used to see it because,
Yeah, the
well,
barbs are very kind of
yeah,
close.
it's a pretty risky move to use a literal religious imagery in your work, even if you are as surely as we are.
I don't know. They're using the Holy Lance in Dies Irae. I don't think. I'm really not sure that Masada
Well, we didn't even
cared
really
for
get a swastika proper in this year.
you. We kind of did when they actually complete the swastika. You can see a huge swastika made of flames.
Well, it's still not quite the same, I'd say. Well, anyway,
Whatever, never.
yes, so we have his sword, we have his suit, which is actually quite a bit more modern than I expected, but not as modern as you'd expect from Paradise Lost itself.
By the way, speaking of suits, something that a Twitter user, loyal, loyal Yoxel, noticed. Pardon me if I mispronounce your name, in case you're listening. Is that Mifra's outfit is actually very futuristic. Uh,
Yes,
Yes, it's very futuristic. There is you can see it the most in her. You can kind of see it in the visual, but you can see it the best in her specific image. You can see that her dress has that red flourish to it, and you can actually see like letters running across it,
yes,
which we found is almost looks like commands of some sorts, like
yes,
program language, which makes sense because Bifra comes from a very futuristic society. I assume that when she did battle during her life, she probably had very futuristic weaponry, a very futuristic suit. So there's also that little detail, which these designs are beautiful, and they certainly didn't save in details, as they say.
yes.
So you know.
If you didn't know it, Juyuski is a workaholic, from what I did know. Like, have you
Yes,
seen Sakuya's design? He had to draw it every single time, in every single CG, on every single sprite. He had to draw it again and again and again in different
and it
poses.
and it and it is beautiful.
Yes. And it's just one character. So yeah, compared to Hermuzan, it's pretty simple actually.
Yes, yes, he is. But that simplicity isn't something bad. He looks very classy.
Yes.
People have already noted his resemblance to Spine, which I don't think I mean, he does resemble Spine, but I don't think that like he resembles him to the point where people have been theorizing that Spine might be in some way related
No,
to Listen, and I don't think that's true. I think people are just really excited to see Spine look alike,
I
and
mean people don't make theories. Let me phrase K or something.
of course. So you
Well,
know,
they did before, but now not quite.
yeah, but you know, as much as we all love Spine and we all know that he's the true protagonist of the franchise, I feel like this is a bit too much. But yeah, he definitely has a classy design.
Yes, and actually he doesn't really strike me as a king of good that he has been described as before. So I do believe that this is how he looks like after he has ascended to the throne.
Either after he has ascended or after he has begun his rebellion against
Yes,
the.
we don't
Um,
even know if it was a process or a single event that made him
yes,
ascend.
of course we don't notice. Though I would think it was probably a process because these kinds of things don't like looking at other examples. These kinds of things don't exactly happen on a whim.
Unless you're
Uh,
Mercurius.
and even with Mercurius, there was something going on there. But yeah, I tend to think that the appearance of the characters we see here is how they appeared in their prime, shall we say?
Yes, basically.
So I would assume this is like Muzan in his strongest. So you know we certainly don't know much about Muzan. He's probably the character we know the least about. Well, no, the second least about. We don't the one we
Yes,
know the
yes.
least about is probably the pink haired girl, but yes, we're looking forward to learn of him and hope to learn of more of him, and
And
hopefully
hopefully it
he's
won't take another year to
hopefully
make
it
an
won't take
update on
another
the
year,
website.
and hopefully he'll also be on the next update. Like they'll actually go in chronological order. It would make sense if they would.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway,
Now,
let's move on, and we go on to Satanael, the Morning Star, who is way behind everyone.
yes.
And apparently he
Um,
doesn't hold both hands before him, which is another thing I assumed from the silhouette.
yes. And he's actually very spot on for his
Yes, he didn't really change at all.
Yeah, he
Well,
just got the wings. Just got the
yes,
wings. But he's definitely wearing that same classy white suit, white devilish suit.
yes,
He
and the
had in
gloves, I
Paradise
think.
Lost. Yes. Well, it looks pretty much spot on, except it looks a lot better because Giusuke draws it.
Yes,
And yeah, he's pretty much what we expected him from the silhouette. Like the only thing we got from the silhouette was the wings. Really, that was also what
yes.
made us. That and the hair is what made us recognize him the most.
I'd
Uh,
say the fact that he didn't really change at all is the most surprising one.
I would assume that maybe Giusuke would want to add something his own to like show off his own personal little flourish there, but
Well,
we've got it pretty much up.
all that said, his suit really does symbolize his ideas as it is already.
I guess it does. I would say that we can't actually say that all of the gods introduced in this visual have something new to them because Reinhardt and Mercurius look spot on for what they were in Dies
Yes,
Irae. Mari just got her new designer dress, and Ren has his crazy new form. But Hajun got a few extra appendages out of it,
yes.
so you know that's. But yeah, you know it's
Well,
Stana.
Satana
Satana.
still got more.
Yes, he got. Yes,
And
but Stana
his
is
wings
cool.
are basically the reason I think everyone is depicted after they have ascended.
Yes. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Unless it's another retcon and Satanael actually did get some wings before ascending and we just didn't know it because Juyusuke didn't draw Paradise Lost and no one else bothered to draw
Well,
all of
there's
it.
also the general possibility because there's that he did, but because you don't see his pride in the ending in the game's final
Ah,
scene, so
yeah, yeah, right.
there's that possibility. But I guess it kind of falls as a retcon as well, in a way. I don't know.
By the way, speaking of wings, can you talk about the differences between having a pair of wings, six wings that was mentioned in Paradise
Oh,
Lost?
oh yes, of course. It's not just mentioned in Paradise Lost. It's kind of a general thing when it comes to discussing Kabbalistic,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Kabbalah, when
yeah, I
discussing
suppose.
angels. But the amount of wings you have, the amount of wings an angel has, to be exact. You don't have wings unless you're an angel.
You can prove it.
Is yeah, I can't prove it, but the amount of wings an angel has is reflects his place in the hierarchy of angels. There's like angels, there's archangels, there's like different angels have
Powers,
subs.
principalities, virtues.
Exactly, exactly right. And some particular angels have many sets of wings, but specifically Satanael, which is the angelic name, the seraphic name of the angel that would later become Lucifer after he had led the rebellion against. He added an host of angels in rebellion against God, which is both a biblical story and has been adapted into the novel Paradise Lost.
Yes.
Had 12 wings, which is symbolic of him being an extremely powerful angel. He was like the highest in the hierarchy of angels, and he was the one who led the rebellion against God.
Yes.
Now, the angels, this is also, by the way, kind of imagery that kind of appears in Senshin Khan, but because there is another character there that is also representative of.
Oh.
There's another character that's representative of Lutz, of the image of the devil,
Oh.
and there is actually a scene where you see that character in its angelic form as the Morning Star, which is a very like Masuda kind of used the same idea to two different directions in these two different franchises. But yes, basically this all kind of connects to Satanael's status as the Morning Star. His full name, by the way, is Neros Satanael.
Yes.
Neros is also another name that has biblical implications. Uh, the full name of the Emperor Nero, when taken in numerology in Hebrew, is 666, which is the
Yes.
number of the beast, which is actually related to Reinhard,
Yes.
which is very interesting. Which is very interesting. You can see the little crossovers going in there, but yeah. Uh, Satanael is obviously based off of Lucifer. His name, the Morning Star, is also a reference to Lucifer. In astrology, the Morning Star, the first star that appears, is also considered to be representative of Lucifer. So yeah, this all relates to to Satanael's status as the Morning Star, as Lucifer, which is also his name on the
Yes.
throne.
Alright, going forward, we have our familiar faces. We have Mercurius, we have Reinhard, we have Mari, and we have Ren. And while Mari did change her dress, we have already seen it on the cover of the English release of the game. We have already seen it on the Pantheon website before it got updated, and we have actually seen it in the anime.
As well, yes.
Yes, and there really isn't much to talk about it. It's really pretty, it fits her, and that's about it.
Yes.
As for Ren, we have again, we already had this dress in
This
uh,
design.
yes, his design. I'm not sure if it was in the anime. Uh, but
It wasn't the wings and blades, like the blade wings he has in the older key visual
yes,
that appeared, but he still has his rather unfashionable coat in that scene.
yes. So, among things that he has here are lotus bracelet, which obviously is connected to his past life as Lotus Reinhardt and his idea of uh, waking up from the dream.
Yes, it's in general connected also to. It's not just connected to the. Okay, so I think this is actually a nice point to kind of segue into a bit of Ren's background,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
but the reference there, in case anyone missed it, is that the name Lotus is actually a reference to the Odyssey, where Odysseus and his crew, on their way back to Ithaca, find an island called the Lotus Eater Island, where there are people who consume lotus leaves, and that puts them in a state of delusion. It's basically drugs. They
Yeah,
consistently drug themselves with lotus leaves and enter a delusion, and basically his crew start consuming lotus leaves and do not wish to leave the island because they're completely disconnected from reality. This
yes.
entire idea is pretty much noted by Lotus in one of the game's final scenes, where he says that he will become the Odysseus that will save everyone who have been captured by delusions and refuse to face the real world, which is a huge allegory for sinking into fiction. Um,
And
which is
it also contrasts Ren's view of the world, which was quite delusional.
yes, it was quite delusional, a desire to always experience the happy times. But
Yes.
and it's a huge step forward for Ren and Lotus as a character, as a composite. Um, but yes, but the other imagery, and by the way, for those of you who aren't so savvy in Japanese, Ren is actually the kanji for lotus.
Yes.
And if you, for example, watched Gurren Lagann or Code Geass, there are units there called Gurren, which means red lotus. So the
Yes.
Ren in Gurren is lotus. So yes, so actually the whole thing, when you find out that his real name is Lotus, you're like, ah, okay. So that's what
That's
it means.
really simple.
That's more simple than I thought it would be.
Yes.
Yes, but there's also the other symbol of red, which is actually the Padma, which is the Hinduistic name for the
Right,
lotus.
right.
Um, which is also which relates to him more to his god form, the hell of Padma, it more goes into like the Buddhist, the Buddhist, the Hinduistic um, origins of it all.
Yes.
But yes, so him having like the lotus bracelet is very appropriate. I also think that when you see Mari's throne in the anime, there are actually lotus leaves decorating it.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
right.
so it's kind of her, relationship with Ren there. There's also the other matter, which is Shiva and I forgot her name, Parvati, if I recall
Parvati,
correctly,
yes.
and Parvati. So you can kind of see that maybe there's kind of a Shiva Parvati relationship between Ren and Mari.
Yeah, because even if Ren is not a very aggressive guy, he still has blades all over him. He has
Yes,
his blade at the very bottom of the visual, hanging from his pants, I suppose,
from his
and
waist.
his wings from the previous visual.
Yes. But it's very symbolic because, as Mari says, that all of her desire to protect and embrace everyone stems from Ren. So you can kind of see it in her throne in
Yes.
which I guess we'll get a better visual of it once the site updates, whenever it does update with
Yeah.
her throne.
Hopefully next month or something.
I don't think we'll get to her throne next month, but I hope it will update next month. Yes.
I think it will. Well, anyway.
But whatever.
And he also has actually a band on his neck, which I suppose hides the scar.
Yes, which is fitting given that Mari also has a band that hides her own scar.
Yes. And I suppose that's it for Ren. Well, besides the fact that he's literally covering Mari,
Yes,
which
which
wasn't
is
actually the case when we had the silhouettes. Then we had Mari before Ren, but now
yes. She's
she's
behind him,
yes,
which also makes sense because the anime kind of, and we'll talk about it next week when we'll talk about what the anime did that's a little different from the VN.
yes,
But the anime actually puts Ren kind of really, shall we say, accentuated how much Ren's existence is kind of made to protect Mari. So
well,
it
which
makes
makes
sense that
sense.
it does make sense, and we can see him even now in the visual guarding Mari. So that's a nice touch.
Yes. Before we go on, I have seen some not quite complaints, but some regrets that Mercurius didn't get a new design. What do you think? How much does LDO uniform fit him anyway?
It fits him fine, but it's I feel like it's odd that they've made this because it's not his most iconic outfit. His most iconic outfit is actually the. It's funny to say this, but it's actually the garbage bag
Yes,
because
it's
it's
formless, like his.
it's formless. It's symbolic of his long journey of the eternal recurrence. It's like and it's also and also so many powerful scenes involving him had him in this outfit, like him bothering, slivering into Shiro's DMs and
Yes.
telling him about for knowledge. That was there. We're used to seeing him in the cloak, so seeing him like this is a little weird. I guess like you could kind of it was kind of an exception, I guess, in the Mitsudomoi battle in Reyes Route because I don't know. I assume that he kind of did it to kind of accommodate Reinhardt, but it's odd that this is the choice he picked because, as far as we know, in life, when he was called Kraft, he didn't actually wear this uniform. He had his
Yes, that's actually something that's been bothering me for quite a
yeah,
while
yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He had that overcoat and he had like that ponytail with the ribbon. And here, like, I can understand him having like his like not like having his air like fluttering like this is very powerful. It's very powerful imagery, but like, I don't know. I guess it just really wanted to have as many characters in this in this key visual be in designer clothes, I guess,
Yes.
because Mari's dress is a designer dress, and we have two characters here in Hugo Boss
Yes.
uniform, and for all we know, Muzan's tuxedo may as well be designer clothes as well.
I would buy it.
I definitely buy it, and yes, so yeah, it's an odd choice, but I don't know. There might be some. I'm sure there's some explanation to it.
Yeah, hopefully. As well as some explanation for Hajun's extra arms. So next we
We
got
can
our
speculate about
favorite
that.
cheat bag.
Ah, yes, yes.
Uh,
Haj-
anyway, uh, he didn't change as much as I expected. We did know that he got extra arms for him. We did know that he's got an entire mandala hovering behind him, so he's always ready to take out some trash. But an interesting detail that I've noticed is that he actually has extra eyes
Extra
on his
eyes,
shoulders. Yes.
right? Yeah, it also look like the arms actually look mechanical, but because they have doll joints. They
Yes.
have ball joints, which is kind of weird. Why is one's mechanical? Now, one possibility, which is a little like I don't know, maybe he had them cut off, like if you know of, for example, of Darumas. of the Dharma doll, about which is a Buddhist
Oh
like
yeah.
yeah, who had his arms cut off. So it's maybe it's this. But then again, when we see him in Kajiri Kamikagura, he actually has like his arms look normal, very like very skinny but normal. They look like there is arms and not
Yes.
mechanical. So
And he's at his strongest at that point.
yes.
Well, actually, I'm not sure he was at his strongest at that point because his rule was already uh, weakened by the Kajirika Muikagura characters.
It was, but every other image of him we've seen, he only has two arms.
Yes.
So I don't know.
So,
Um,
my theories are basically as follows. Either his extra arms are actually the sign of him being weakened, so because he has more arms, it's more difficult for him to,
to avoid touch.
yes, something like that. Or it's because the unknown enemy of the Pantheon is so powerful that just having two arms is not quite enough to take them out.
Another point of reference is that having multiple arms is like a sign of godhood in Hinduism and
Yes, as well as
Buddhism.
having three eyes.
Yes. So him having extra arms is like does kind of relate to his origins, to his Indian origins, shall we
Yes.
say. So there's, that's like the first thing that actually came to my mind. That multiple arms is like,
Well, yeah, yeah, it was a
Shiva.
pretty logical conclusion to take.
Yes.
And why would he need extra eyes anyway?
Um, I don't know. I don't think he even knows why he needs extra eyes. I don't think he wants that third eye. I don't think he wants eyes at all. The question of why he has free eyes in the first place is a very debated topic.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess if the arms are mechanical, then I guess because the eye is a symbol, the
Yes.
free eyes are a symbol. Then I guess if they're mechanical, then they kind of symbolize him in a
Yes.
way. I suppose.
I would say that the extra eyes, as far as Kajiri Kamikagura goes, is a symbol of Hajun looking for uh, the others, so to say, and he tries to find them and get rid of them, and still can't, even despite having more eyes than any other person. And getting even more eyes on top of that basically just reinforces that idea that he
Yeah, because
he
he's looking
sees
for
but
something.
can't see anything.
Yes.
Well, hopefully, since he is in a team of gods this time, he does have uh,
He has to learn
to
teamwork.
communicate and that stuff. Yes.
Wholesome
Get
Hajun
Muriata Isu, friends.
Yes, yes. Wholesome Ajun is coming. Prepare yourselves.
Yes. Tasty curry is awaiting. And that brings us to the last throne, which is actually represented by two characters on the key visual. Um, this is actually a pretty interesting topic that has been going since we had the silhouettes. Why do we even need two characters to represent Amaterasu when we had so much more?
Right.
And for now, uh, the mm, I would say the most prominent theory is that the two girls who are called heroines on the stream are representatives of Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi, who were born of Izanagi and Izanami, and the two of them are represented by Habaki and Rindo in Kajiri Kamui Kagura, which means that we get at least some
I
children.
actually saw it in another way. I actually saw it as more as them as representing Izanagi and Izanami, actually, because Habaki's attack, Yomotsugairi, is a reference to Izanagi, to the myth of Izanagi leaving Yomotsu Arasaka after trying to trying to take back Izanami. It's like a take on it's the Japanese version, shall we say, of the Orpheus myth, or of the escape from Sodom,
Yes,
with
yes.
Lot's wife, where the tragic mistake is looking back when you were told not to. Lot's wife looked around and became a pillar of salt. Orpheus looked around and lost his love for all eternity. And Izanagi turned around, saw Izanami as a decaying skeleton, and was basically chased by her and cursed that every day she will kill 1,000 of his children, and he made an oath to always make 1,001 children every day. Which is actually a really cool thing to
Yes.
say. It's like a crazy comeback.
That's Zeus.
Yes, that's pretty awesome. But the the aria of Habaki's attack, which is like a counter attack, he absorbs all the damage given to him and returns it 2 times over, is actually the line from the Kojiki where Izanagi says that he will always make more children than she kills. So in that regard, I never saw them as Tsukuyomi and Amaterasu, even though Amaterasu is obviously a major theme. I actually never saw them as Izanagi and Izanami, which could be very meaningful because, as you said, Izanagi and Izanami. Actually, it's not quite true. It's not quite true. They're not the children of Izanagi and Izanami. They're the children of Izanagi only as a result of
Oh,
his escape.
yeah, yeah, right.
Because after that, he goes to purify himself from all the miasma of the Japanese underworld. He goes to a spring, washes himself, and the water that drips from one eye becomes
Amaterasu.
Amaterasu. From the other becomes
Tsukuyomi.
Tsukuyomi, and I don't remember what. And I
From
think the
his
water
nose.
and the water from his nose becomes the god of the storm. Which I actually, this is embarrassing. I actually forgot his name.
Susanoo.
Susano, right? So, yeah. So it's actually interesting that Izanami had nothing to do with there. But yeah, that's pretty much some Japanese history, some Kajiri
Yes.
Kamikaze
And
theorizing.
because of that, people think that the pink heroine is Amaterasu and the dark heroine is Tsukuyomi. Well, that's just a single theory. Another theory is that silver-haired heroine is Rindo herself.
Yes.
As we have already learned, gods can change quite a lot after they ascend to godhood, and this might just be one of the ways she has changed.
Yes.
She got a new hair color, a new eye color, and new uniform on top of it.
Yes, the uniform is actually something we'll be discussing in a bit, but there's a few points to her outfit. Like you said, it's a uniform. It's actually a little different from the other girl's uniform in that it seems unbuttoned. Um,
Yes,
Another matter is that she has a beret, which has the Amaterasu symbol on it, which is
yes,
a nice little touch. The entire uniform looks very kind of militaristic, I guess, or like police uniform, which is
yes.
kind of very very thought provoking. There's a lot to say there,
The
but I
fun
do think
police
that
so fun must go through us.
but I do think she's Rindo. She looks like Rindo. If you
Yeah,
look at,
actually,
I've already posted this around on Twitter. But if you look at her modern design in Kajiri Kagura, like you can actually see her with a hat, and it actually looks kind of similar to that.
yes.
She also has like the ear ribbons, which are a little different than Rindo's hair ribbons, but Rindo also had ear ribbons. The biggest difference, however, is that this heroine's hair is a lot shorter than Rendo's.
Yes.
Rendo has very long, very flowing black hair, while this one, as far as we can see, has shorter white hair.
Yes.
So it's, you know.
And besides that, we have a very important question to ask
To
here.
answer, yes.
Yes, is where did they even come from? Because after Kajiri Kamui Kagura is over, the Seventh Throne has 6 gods, which I believe can't even have children anymore. And because of that, there is apparently some unknown way to be introduced to the, let's say, pantheon of Amaterasu. We don't really know how it works, but it should be there. Otherwise, we just wouldn't have these two brand new heroines represented.
We have at least one new hero, and we don't know about the other one because the other one could very well be Rendo, and she's just appearing there because she was considered the leader of Amaterasu, so it would make sense for her to be there because you could claim that the other gods of Amaterasu, despite having ascended, they were actually all under her. She was the one who apparently took the throne, as far as we know. She had the... Because she was considered the leader of the group. She actually had Reinhardt's Spear of Longinus as her weapon. She was not the last one to fight Hajun, but the second to last one to fight Hajun before the final confrontation with him, which was a very personal kind of issue. But as far as we know, she is the leader of the group, so it would make sense for her to appear, and this is also why we assumed when the silhouettes were there that it would be her.
Yes.
But there is at least one new character, and we're not sure about her origins. We're not sure who she is. We don't know. People assume that she is in some way maybe related to Habaki and Rendo. People assume she might be like their daughter.
Or she might be even Habaki himself, who just gender swapped or something.
Yes, there is a lot of speculation going on there. Every theory sounds a little crazier than the one before.
Yes.
We'll find out in due time. So far, we know next to nothing about her.
Well, besides the fact that her hair is
representative
because of the sakura, which means that her entire being might be a symbol of sorts, like she is the sakura tree or something like that. Like,
yes,
she might be the sum of everyone brought into a single being.
Yes, that's definitely a possibility. There's all sorts of theories going about, but we'll find out. But I will say, since we finally got into her, that I was actually really impressed by her design. Like when we first saw her silhouette, a lot of people kind of had a lot of big question marks over her head because she looked like Rusalka because of the way her hair works and the way her skirt.
Put it that way, but anyway, yeah.
No, it was the first thing that popped to mind, but everybody knew that. How would it be Rusalka? It would make no sense for it to be her. But as soon as we saw her design, as soon as I saw her face, I felt like she's an entirely different kind of character. She has a beautiful smile. She has a beautiful beautiful expression. And she's very pretty, and she's already a fan favorite for many.
Yes.
As cute girls are. But she also wears the same uniform as Rindo, which is like the biggest QN to her being of the same throne as she. And we've actually gotten a question from a good friend of ours called Opie Defender, who asked, is there any meaning to them wearing the same uniform? And we've actually just explained this. The meaning to to them having the same uniform is them basically stemming from the same divinity, from the same throne.
Yes.
We don't know what the uniform means as of now, though we certainly would like to know. But that's pretty much their connection.
Well, yes, the simple fact that they do have a uniform means that they are a part of some larger group, and that
Yes.
group is the Seventh Throne. And by the way, another point that I'd like to mention here is that both of them have a symbol of the sun on their
On the
belts.
on the on the belt buckle, yeah.
Yes, and it even has 7 rays,
Yes.
which is obviously the Seventh Throne.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's about it for the key visual.
Yes.
And we did our best to talk about everything we could, and we even went past an hour doing that. And we are
There was a lot. There was a lot to talk about, Joe.
yes, and we are still not done actually, because on the very same day, last Saturday, Light have had uh, the
At a stream.
yes, they had a stream, the very first issue of Dies Irae Radio that we didn't have in a while, and we had Yuinyani and Harasawa-san discussing Pantheon to some degree, although most of it was again old info, like they said, this is the first god, this is the second god, and that's nothing new for the veteran fans who are listening to us. But they did talk about some more points, which are pretty short but worth mentioning. So, first of all the gods on the main visual are supposed to be the units of the highest rarity in the game, which makes sense.
Yes.
And actually, there apparently was a small leak about some gameplay details of Pantheon, which was apparently leaked last October, and we just didn't notice it, which said the same thing. I
Yes.
don't think we will discuss it today because we are.
We're also not very sure about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
about
it's
how correct
it
about how
sounds
accurate.
plausible, but that's about it.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, they are of the highest rarities, so look forward to rerolling for Hajun. Anyway, the next point of info that we were given is that Amaterasu are called the heroines, which is not quite as
It's
simple
not.
as you'd think, because it might mean two completely different things. It might mean that they are heroines that you, as the protagonist, go after, like in a visual novel, or it
Not
might.
necessarily go after, but like they're like shall we call them the main protagonist of the story, or like the central female character of the story.
Yes, yes. So the main question now is there even a male protagonist in Pantheon?
Yes, that's actually something that we've been that I've been mulling over. I don't know. I don't think I've actually discussed this with you, like
I
in
think we
private.
did.
But there's basically a couple of possibilities here. The first one is that the pink-haired girl might be our player character, which I think would make the most sense story-wise.
Yes.
However, there's also the other possibility, which, if you, for example, look at other social games, most of the time you do actually input your name, and in some cases you also get to pick your gender, like in Grand Blue Fantasy, like in Fate Grand Order.
Yes.
You basically you basically have, like, the character design is set, but you get to put your own name and choose your own gender, and you're basically like an acting character in the story. Maybe not a playable character, but you are a
Right. Right.
character in the story. Um, so there's also the possibility that we will be able to create our own characters and the new girl, as we call her, Fever-chan, because of the post she's making. Fever-chan may very well be like our main supporting character.
Yes. Like
Kind of, yes. Though to a much greater extent, since Fever-chan is a goddess. So as far as we know, she could actually be like very powerful, as opposed to Mashu, who's
Well,
more of a supportive character.
she
But that's
should be.
besides the point. But that's besides the point. That's already speculation.
Yes.
But yes, the main problem with this theory is that, like, I don't know, I find it hard to see how it would fit into the story. The last, the third possibility I thought of is that you do input your name, but it's entirely a gameplay function. It's like there is a gameplay to story segregation going on. You have like your own username, which others will see when I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know,
of course.
interacting with you in some way. But as far as the story goes, you don't exist, and you just watch these characters go through the story.
Well, I'm not sure that's the best option, but it's there. Yeah.
No, I don't know if it's the best option, but I do think it's a plausible one.
Yes.
Um, But yes, I guess we will find out. It will be like depending on how it goes, because for example, if we go with the first option, then that's actually a pretty big story changing thing because it means the story will actually take place. Excuse me. If depending on how it goes, the story could actually take place in third person, which is a little different from everything else we've seen in Shinza so far.
Yes.
We've always read Shinza from a first person perspective.
Oh, that said, Kamui Kagura had different perspectives.
It had different perspectives, but but it was almost always first person.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Alright, so the next point is about the Nintendo Switch version, which we have discussed last time.
Yes.
New Nyan mentioned that the brand new episode that will be added in it will actually be about a conversation between gods, like episode 0, but I believe it will have all the gods talking to each other.
Yes.
So, if nothing else, it will give us all new voice actors for them.
Oh, hopefully.
And apparently they are amazing, as they usually
Yeah,
are.
let's hope so.
And this episode will be called. Alright, so
Let me
the
let me. Okay.
translation of the name of this episode is The Legend of the Messiah.
Yes.
But how exactly it's written is not quite
Yes,
known yet.
because our Sawa-san read it and he himself wasn't sure how to read it. But as far as we know, it's something along the lines of Saoshiant Disatine, is
Yeah,
something to that
something like that.
extent.
And Saoshant actually is a word. It means things. It's well, basically the Messiah, but from the Zoroastrian religion.
Zoroastrian religion, yes.
Yes, and if you haven't heard it before, Zoroastrianism is going to be one of the main uh, ideas of the first throne, if nothing else. So, uh, from what I suppose, it will be connected to Mithra, first and foremost.
Yes.
And as for who this Messiah is, it's up for discussion. It might be Ren, it might be Amaterasu, it might be someone else, but well, that's basically all we know for now. And
Yes, actually, if you start looking up Sociant, it's actually you see all sorts of interesting things that may or may not be relevant
yes,
to Mifra. There's definitely a lot to dig in there.
yes,
So yes.
I basically found out yesterday, so I didn't have the time to write a lot about it yet, but I probably will soon. Anyway, and the last point that we got is that we will actually get gameplay of some sort soon after the Switch uh, version release.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not actually sure if it will be for Switch or for PC,
Yeah,
if it will be a gameplay demo or just a video. Uh, Either way, uh, the release of the Switch version is for now one of the key dates that will bring us that much closer to Pantheon's release. And because of that, I actually think that we can actually expect the release of Pantheon this year if they really are going to show gameplay in September.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I don't know if we can expect it to be out by before 2019. If only because, as you know, probably social game releases are very prone to change. They're very sporadic.
Yes.
Things can things can fall apart and in like a matter of minutes, unexpected, especially towards the release. There have been so many social game who have had a release date and then the game went down and died for a week.
Sure, sure. All that said, the gameplay isn't usually released that early. It's usually released closer to the game's release date. So I'm just cautiously optimistic for now.
Maybe I think maybe winter 2019, assuming nothing goes
Yes,
wrong,
yes, that
is
sounds
like
realistic.
optimistic. It sounds realistic, optimistic enough. Assuming that the release, of course, goes smoothly.
Yes.
But I guess we'll find out.
Anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing it in action. I am looking
Of
forward
course.
to seeing more updates of the website, which will hopefully have something else besides the world descriptions, which is not bad, but I just kinda uh, like
Like we got information this week, and there's a lot to mull over. But in the end, we still haven't gotten anything really juicy to sink our teeth
yes,
into.
this is basically the main idea that's going over in Japan. That despite waiting for an entire year, the site still says that it's a teaser website, and we still don't have anything besides the Yusuke illustrations.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's all pretty cool, and hopefully we will have more news to discuss next week about it. But for now, we should move on
The
uh,
anime.
to the anime. Yes, and so last time we have discussed the first 6 episodes, and this time we will discuss the next 6, which were the second half of the TV portion of the
Second,
anime.
yeah, and the second third of the anime in general.
Yes. And that means that our first episode today is episode 6, The Golden Beast, which covers Shiro's explanation of his weird sense of deja vu, which has been following him ever since he has killed his friend's father. We have 2 different fights, which take place on the Swahara Bridge between Kay and Ren and Wilhelm and Shiro. Then Father Trifa comes and stops the fight between Ren and Kay, asks Ren to come with him. They have a small confrontation. Then Reinhard appears and faces Ren himself. Okay, so this is one of those episodes.
Yes, it's a very controversial episode.
Anyway,
For good reason.
yes.
For good reason.
So, as far as direction goes, it's not actually that bad, I think.
Half of it isn't, at least.
Yes.
Okay, so basically, Shiro's intro is good.
Yes.
It was pretty cool. And the beginning of Shiro's fight with Kay is okay, even though I don't like how the anime, much like with Ren, I don't like how the anime handled around on an airbay. And it's actually really, it's this thing where Kay has actually been infamous for being a dead ringer for Shana, with her
Yes.
katana, with her Japanese sword, with flame hair, and somehow when she actually goes into Bria, Kay looks a lot worse than Shana, which is a shame. So yeah, I don't really dig how the anime handled Kay's appearance, but the battle, for the most part, was okay, with the exception of some perhaps odd cuts after they fall off the bridge. But yeah, that part was okay. Shiro's fight with Wilhelm was pretty cool. We get to see the anime version of his liquid hydrogen attack.
Yes, actually, it was really inventive. I think that it wasn't like making Wilhelm a complete idiot. Like, I don't care about this weird object. I'll just hit it. No, in the anime, it's like a huge car full of liquid hydrogen, which he can't really dodge, even
Yeah,
if he's superhuman.
yeah, he
So
kind of has to.
even if it makes Shiro look cool, it also kinda makes Wilhelm look as cool too.
Yes. Now, of course, there was the as usual, and it made me laugh that it's like Hulk logic because Wilhelm gets frozen, smashed, and then he comes out. His clothes is ripped except for his pants.
Yes.
So that's kind of like Hulk logic, but that's just the whole thing. That fight was cool. Then there's the second half, and there's the first half with Rifa, which people have cited as one of Nardakin's oddest performances.
Yeah.
The way he refers to Heydrich in that particular scene, it's actually to the point where when Nardakin actually went on Dies Irae Radio, so Yu and Yan actually mentioned it. It's a thing. But that's like the least of this episode's trouble in this regard, because this episode actually made a huge change compared to the visual novel.
Yes.
Where instead of Ren just trying to attacking Reinhardt and trying to cut his head off with the guillotine and failing, it actually ended up being a really big climactic battle.
Yes.
With Ren actually randomly, not exactly randomly, but kind of randomly turning into his Einfaust finale form, which is odd for many, many reasons. The first of which, that Eintracht finale is Bria, and Ren hasn't achieved that yet. You can now, of course, there is a reason for that, which is Mercurius interfering, as always. But the big problem, let's be honest, is that this form doesn't look good in the anime. Like everything related to Ren's powers, it just doesn't look good.
It could have looked good, but it doesn't.
It didn't. So yeah, I kind of understand that this is actually a form that's like possibly a little hard to make in motion, because we mostly just see it as a CG in the game.
Yes.
And when it's static, it looks cool, but I think that if you really want to make Ren's form with all of these blades coming out of his back, simultaneously slashing and cutting, it would be a feat that would be hard for any animation company to pull off. And I'm not of course saying that it wouldn't, but it would be a very hard cut to make regardless. So putting it on such a low budget production as Dies Irae is probably a little too taxing. But yeah, it's of course this is no excuse. It looks bad, and this is one of those things that I felt that they just put into the anime for the sake of just a fan service of inserting content from another route. Yeah. That said, Reinhardt's side of the battle was actually kind of cool. Now, people have been complaining about the huge skeleton.
Yes.
But the anime didn't invent that skeleton.
Yes.
It appeared half a year before that in Interview for Kazuko Bay. And if you haven't read it, all you have to do is go into Google, type Interview with Kazuko Bay, and look at the opening, and you will see that big skeleton fire beams of energy in the opening movie for the game. It didn't invent it. So when we saw it, it's it wasn't a huge surprise for the veterans.
It looked
but
different, but
it looked different. It looked more adorned, definitely.
Yes.
It also looked more CG, sadly.
Well, yeah.
But the skeleton itself isn't Like a lot of people, if you think this is a change from the visual novel, you're right and you're wrong. It is. It wasn't in the visual novel, but it is a canonical thing. Um, and of course, this is also like a very good demonstration of what it means to fight for Reinhard Heydrich. The
Yes.
guy is a living legion, so him manifesting warships, planes, tanks,
Well, I do have
his
to say
soldiers.
that I'm a bit disappointed it was just floating tanks and airplanes, etc., and not the way it was described in Ikabe. Like, there are so many of them, they can just go on top of each other and reach the floating
Well,
opponent.
well, keep in mind that Reinhardt isn't in his full power at this point in the visual novel.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't know was if Reinhardt in his Ikabe was stronger than his partially resurrected form here. But the idea is it actually was a good representation of what it means to fight
Yes.
Of Reinhardt's fighting style, as it were.
Yes.
So yeah, this episode, the changes it made weren't on paper weren't bad.
Yeah,
They were.
basically.
It's just as always, the presentation is what sunk this ship in a way. Ren looked bad. His animation looked bad. The way he moved looked bad.
Yeah, but overall the direction itself is pretty good, I think. It's just that the animation side of the episode just was
Yeah,
not sufficient.
and of course, the climactic end of the episode with Ren failing to kill Reinhard and Reinhard stealing away Mari. Uh, that's a very memorable scene from the visual novel
Yes.
as well.
And for comparison, actually, in the manga, they also had to visualize this scene despite the fact it only had like one or two CGs in the visual novel. So Ren doesn't go Einfall's finale. He just gets an extra huge guillotine on his hand, and he cuts through Reinhardt's forces and uh, basically Reinhardt does not summon the skeleton. He himself looks like a giant on the horizon, and Ren uses this giant guillotine to try and cut giant Reinhardt's neck.
That sounds so weird.
It was, especially before it was redrawn for the Tankobon version of the manga. I think it's actually pretty similar to what we have seen in the last few episodes. Well, anyway, that's just something to consider. It wasn't something anime invented. It was in the air, so to say.
Yes,
Alright, so hmm, good idea, bad execution. Okay,
as
so
always.
episode 7 is called Swastika. Is It mostly concerns Reinhardt's exposition with Ren in the uh, Obsidian Round Table chamber, and we also get a short glance at Ren's
Past.
infancy, so to say. Yes, and there isn't really much to say here besides that last part, I think.
Yes. Well, for starters, there's also the opening scene with the concert in Glassheim,
Yes.
which is actually, as far as I know, is a step up from the manga where you actually have
Yes,
the
we
three
only
generals
had like
playing.
some
Yeah,
spinny looking people,
yeah.
and that's it.
Which for many would be heaven, but
Yes.
yes. But this scene was okay. I think it was a little animated, but Reinhardt at least looked good.
Yeah.
Um, Now,
And we have Machina playing on the triangle,
of course,
the
because
manliest instrument.
yes, yes, I imagine that you gotta imagine that moment when Reinhard tells them to pick their instruments, and you just see Reinhard
There was
standing
actually
there
another
crying.
drama about that,
Yeah.
which we
Uh,
should probably translate one of these
yes, sure.
days.
We should. We'll go over them.
Yeah.
It'll take us forever, but we'll go through all of them. And then we have the scene with Ren in the prison, being released. With Rhea trying to release him from the prison, which is something of an interesting thing because this was actually where in the visual novel there was an H scene.
Yes.
Yeah, Rhea pretty much tries to have Ren sleep with her out of, I suppose, I'm not sure if it's ever said directly, but perhaps out of a hope that if she gets pregnant, it would get in the way of her functioning as Zonenkin.
Yeah, basically.
In the anime, she just tells him to have sex with her, but he obviously refuses because now is not the time for this. And after that, we have the conversation with Reinhard, which actually looked pretty good, though, of course, it's a very static scene. But because it's a very static scene...
Reinhard does try to liven it up.
He tries to liven it up, no, but the point is, despite... Perhaps because it's such a static scene, they were able to actually do, like, the faces and expressions. Like, yes. Ren looks pretty good in this episode. Sure. Reinhard looks pretty good in this episode. So, yeah, that's, that scene was, half the episode, and it was pretty good. And, of course, in the end, we have Mari being returned to him and being very cute as she develops emotions for the first time.
Yes. Anyway, about the flashback with Ren, do you think we should have seen it here, or was there a better place to have it?
You see, this thing is a little problematic because this kind of content actually doesn't belong in Mari's route. It belongs in Rhea's route. Much the same way as we had the flashback with Lotus and with Lotus earlier on. Or was it later on? I think it was later on.
I think it was later, yeah.
It was later, yeah, but kind of like we had the flashback with Lotus, and kind of like we had this scene here. This doesn't actually belong in Mari's route. The entire discourse regarding Ren's origin story is actually in Rhea's route.
Yeah, so because they kind of, in Mari's route, he doesn't really care who he is.
Actually, that's an interesting point. And that's something that we'll have to that we'll go into a little more detail when we discuss the final 6 episodes. But him not caring about his origin story is a plot point. Actually, it's something that he later realized is really weird that he doesn't care about his origin story. But yes, this scene actually ended up triggering a lot of fans because it was, as most of the new content did. Mostly because it kind of changed. It seemingly kind of changed Ren's origin story, but I don't think it did. But I don't think it actually did. Basically, this scene gave us, for the first time, it actually gave a character that didn't have a design up until now. It actually gave them a design. We were introduced to Kasumi's father.
Yes.
And we even got him a voice. Yes, and we actually also got Kasumi's mother. Which
a bit later on, but yeah.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
this episode only had the scene in the lab, I think.
Okay, then thank you for freshening my memory. But either way, we actually see the scene where we see Ren being discovered as like an homunculus baby in a tube by Spine and Kasumi's father.
Spine was a bit later too.
Was he? Okay.
Yes. He was after the scene with Kasumi's mother, I think.
Oh, okay. Then either way, he's discovered by Kasumi's father and christened as Ren, as the child of the Lotus, born from the Lotus. Now, fans were actually rather bothered by this because it kind of means that Ren's origin is a little changed, but I don't think it is, because Ren has been, ever since, as far as I know, since also Sparks Zarathustra, Ren has actually been described as Mercurius's magic, like a magical sample of Mercurius.
Yeah, it was always pretty blurry.
It was always pretty blurry, but his origin, we never actually knew who quote unquote gave birth to him.
Yes. Now we do.
Now we kind of do, yes. But the idea is that he was basically placed in this tube by Karl Kraft and has been slowly maturing ever since World War II, and eventually was discovered and cultivated by Kasumi's father.
By the way,
Uh,
from what I understand, it was also mentioned in one of the novels, which was released not too long before the anime.
that must have been in Wolf's Rudder because it wasn't in
Yes,
something.
yes. In Volsrudel, Shiro and Ellie explore the dark underbelly of Suvahara, find this whole Zarathustra project, find Spina's involvement in it, and apparently there are a lot of potential Zarathustra clones somewhere.
That's interesting. I'm going to have to pick up this novel at some point. But either way, and this is like, by the way, this is like a huge example of just how much potential there is to
Yes,
like to like build up the Irae
just
story.
because you have read the visual novel doesn't mean you know it all.
You don't know it all. You definitely don't know it all. And there's definitely a crazy amount of potential for like spin-off stories and like because there's actually ever since World War II, and I've said this before, everything between World War II and the beginning of the visual novel is a huge blur, and stuff has been going on for sure.
Yes.
There are organizations out there are governments out there that are perfectly aware that the LDO exists and have
They're not really
superpowers,
subtle about it.
and they're not subtle about it at all. You also kind of see it a bit in the end of Wilhelm's game.
Yes.
That you can basically see that there are like entire organizations that are like, wow, Reinhard is about to be resurrected. Let's help him so we can also get a piece of the pie here.
That sure
So yeah,
goes well.
that definitely goes well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential here, but we've kind of gone off topic.
Yes.
But this entire origin story thing for Ren is something that the anime expanded on. Not all the fans liked it. I personally think it's fine because it actually
It
doesn't contradict anything.
yeah, basically it didn't bother me at all. Like I expected to see something like it, and it was fine by me.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So overall, this episode was pretty average
It was an improvement
over the
over the
last one.
last.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Okay, so that means we move on to episode number 8, which is called
Yes.
Promise. We have the LDO basically going on to open swastikas in short order. We have Ellie kidnapping Kasumi so she's safe in the club, and that doesn't really go well because Rusalka comes and devours everyone over there, except for Kasumi actually. And we have more bonding moments between Ren and Mari, who have a promise of meeting on the rooftop with everyone after everything is over.
Yes.
Alright, so the most important thing in this episode, I believe, is that we have our very first Bria.
We have our very first aria, to be exact.
Yes, and I actually really liked how it was handled in the anime.
Yeah, visually it's pleasing. It's just that the anime is inconsistent with the arias, with how long they are and when the letters actually appear. But yeah, in the anime, the arias are basically kind of appear as like letters around the character as they recite them.
Yeah, I actually
Uh,
really like the fact that they appear in different places because it allows for some personal touch for each and every area.
Individuality, yes.
Yes, yes.
This episode was a treat for me personally because it was a Rusalka episode in many
Yes,
ways.
we actually had some adult Rusalka, which wasn't in the visual novel here.
Yes, apparently she can not exactly freely, but she can go from adult form to young form, which you know is which was a very sensual, very kind of dark scene that was
Yes.
going on there. There's also like her shot at the very start of the episode with sitting in her room, sitting in the same room Wilhelm sat in,
Yes.
oddly enough, with a wine glass in her hand. But yes, it was a very good Rusalka episode. We also had our battle with Shiro and Ellie, which I wasn't. I think it could have been handled a bit better. I didn't like the way they were devoured. I think it was a little weird.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there was a lot of weird stuff with the way they fought them,
Yeah,
with the way they fought her.
there
Like how,
was some moments where she like stopped bullets in midair, and it didn't really make sense for some
no, no, no.
viewers.
Her stopping bullets in midair is fine because she can use magic. Right? I would assume that was magic and not an unnerve. But what was weird is that she was able to stop an explosion, which is really weird.
Yeah,
That was weird, and I'm not sure what the logic behind that is. But whatever. The episode was for the overall good, so I was willing to roll with the punches in this one. But
yeah,
it
yeah,
was a bit weird. There's also this episode is also kind of weird in a lot of ways. In general, because it was actually a very fan servicey episode.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we have the episode starts with Kasumi changing into out of her uniform. Then we have the phone call with Ellie, where we get a random panty shot, and
Yes.
then we have Mari trying out Kasumi's outfits, which was also a fan servicey moment.
Yes.
And a lot of fans were like, "Why are they being so aggressive with the fan service all of a sudden?" Because that I don't know, it doesn't really sit well with Dies Irae in a lot of ways. Even if Dies Irae started off as an adult visual novel, it still wasn't like this.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't like this. It wasn't with random fan service and panty shots. But yes,
Yeah, besides that, it was a pretty fine episode. I do want to stress that even if people don't really like wasting time, so to say, on Ren and Mari just talking to each other, it's still very important in the grand scheme of things, because that's exactly what makes it all the Mari route, so to say. So if you without these scenes, the entire progression of their interaction just wouldn't make sense by the end of it.
it's also a visual novel.
Yeah, yeah, of course, but as we know, that doesn't mean it's in the anime,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
Uh, Alright, so I think we can go on to the episode number 9, which is called Mother's
Sinful love.
Sinful Love, yes. It begins with Lisa's flashback, which explains the title to some degree. Then we move on to the hospital, where we are having another fight with LTO. This time we also have Lisa's struggle with Trifa. Uh, we have uh, Kay using her Bria for the first time, and we have Eleanor appearing on the scene by the end of it. And again, this was a pretty good episode. I think it wasn't that heavy on fan service. It wasn't that heavy on questionable changes that weren't in the visual novel, and it had some pretty cool shots with Kain appearing from the dark, which I think was a bit too.
I
I
should
didn't imagine it as a portal, so to say, but
I
okay.
should note in general that I don't like Hein's design in the anime. I feel
Yeah,
it was I don't like the way they draw his head. At least it was a lot more simplified. It was like I don't know. They made him kind of monstrous, but I don't know. I felt he was more menacing in the visual novel.
I
Uh,
suppose.
like I don't know. I mean, it's hard to compare. It's always hard for me to look at the anime compared to the visual novel because the visual novel is Yusuke. You can't
Yes,
exactly
yes, of
compete with.
course.
You just can't compete with that. But I'm not sure I like. on the anime in general did kind.
Well, at least
But
he's big.
yes, he's definitely big.
He
Um,
dominates every scene he's in.
for the most part.
Yeah.
But except when there's a bigger guy. But
Yes.
yeah, the starting scene, the opening scene with Isaac's birth and Johan's birth, that was creepy. It was
Yes.
it was creepy. It was effective. Uh, I could definitely sympathize with Lisa's scream.
Yes.
He's it was every bit as creepy as you'd
Like,
think.
it's a point that some people don't really sympathize with. Like, why would you ever abandon your child? Surely it wasn't
Yeah,
that
people
bad.
yeah,
No, it
people
was.
people often kind of have trouble understanding Lisa's motivations.
Yes.
But I think that this episode makes it perfectly clear why she spared Johan and was willing to sacrifice Isaac.
Yes.
So yeah, then there's another scene with Mari, which is very cute. But then we go to the hospital, and the hospital actually has the beginning of the confrontation between Lisa and Triffa,
Yes.
the big married couple quarrel, shall we say? Um, yeah, Triffa basically confronts her um, about Johan, about who was the father, and although I don't think we see it this episode, right? Oh, we do see it this episode actually. We do see who the father was in this
Oh, yeah,
episode.
yeah.
It's the moment of Isaac's conception that she basically slept with Reinhardt's body after
Yes.
she resurrected
Which
it.
actually used her design from Ikabe.
Yes. It used her design from Ika. Well, yeah, it did. It used her Yetzirah from
Yes.
Ikabe,
Her
which is the
shroud.
dress. Yes, the dress and the shroud. Yes. Um, Otherwise, there's the confrontation between them. There's kind of, as you said, appearing. Uh, there's Kay, of course, and
Kay
then
didn't have her full aria, by the way. She
yeah,
just says the name of her Bria and that's it. But
yeah.
actually, the way she transformed was pretty good, I think. Despite everything you mentioned, like it's worse than Shana, but it's still pretty nice.
I personally don't agree because I don't know, but let's leave it at that. It's not distractingly bad. I'll say that. And then
Yeah, yeah,
Eleanor appears, and
certainly.
Eleanor is Eleanor is as imposing as ever. And I thought about this recently, and Eleanor's design is such an effective, good design. You understand a lot about her just by looking at her design.
Yeah,
Uh, so yeah, she's
and
definitely.
she also has her own skeleton in this episode.
Yes, but we will be seeing more of it
Yeah,
coming up.
it's weird because her own design is so good, while her skeleton is not really uh, special in any way, so to say.
Yeah, yeah, but we can only say that because of Schreiber's skeleton. Because
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
Schreiber's skeleton is like it's very visually like him, and it's not like Eleanor isn't like Eleanor is just as visually striking as he is. So it's odd that her design is so relatively plain compared to his.
well, I would guess they wanted to show that she's like an
One of
inferior first and foremost, and it's just a skeleton clad in armor because she's the closest to uh,
She's
being
the most soldier.
Yes,
She's a
yes,
soldier.
and the very fact that she has a giant skeleton is basically enough to show just how strong she is.
Yes.
and it apparently vomits lava or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so overall, pretty good episode, mostly because the direction is good again. Because uh, the most important scene of the episode is Lisa's flashback, and it's done very well. And everything else is not really that important. No one would have complained if they have done it badly or plainly or whatever. It's fine as it is. And the part that should have been good is pretty good. Alright, and we move on to episode number 10, Ein Herjar, which starts with a case explanation of the Sakurai curse of the Wewelsburg Longinus, the story of its creation, and the story of Tubalcain as it is. Then we move on to Eleanor taking the charge of the scene, so to say. She confronts Lisa, she confronts Mari, she confronts Ren, and then she just makes the entire hospital explode. And we have Machina breaking through space-time on his giant mech and talking to Eleanor and telling her to just retreat for now, as the swastika is already open. Okay, so this episode combines exposition and action pretty well. We have the exposition scene of the Sakurai family. I'm not sure this was the best place to explain it, but it's as good as any other, I suppose.
They would have to introduce it though, because because it comes into play a bit later.
To tell us about it somewhere. It also had Sakurai Musashi being alive, which isn't that often.
Yes.
This is actually the first time we see him alive, I believe.
Yes.
And we have a short glance of Sakurai Rei, which was actually the third time we see her over the course of the entire franchise. And we have again a lovely shot of Kai and Beatrice. We have a nice moment where Lisa takes her eye out and makes it pop out of Kain's mask, which was both cool in the visual novel and cool here. I love that they actually made it work here. And after that, it's basically Eleanor telling everyone how stupid they are.
Yes, and this was actually poor Mari, man. Poor Mari. The goddess got beat up this episode, and it was.
I'd say that it was actually a bit longer than it should have been.
Probably, and it was actually really amusing to see Eleanor's voice actress apologize to Sakakibari.
Yes.
That was, that was a thing. But yeah, it was an overall okay episode. I don't have any particular complaints. There's also, of course, the big scene with Ren's quote, "How dare you beat up my woman?"
Yes. This is where you understand this is the Mari route.
Yes. And yeah, we have Lisa's death.
Yes.
Her tragic death.
Which doesn't
and
it's her final scene, but
in a way. And we also have, as you said, Machina. Now, this is I feel like this is kind of where the anime being restricted to one route naturally is kind of a shame, because this scene actually connects to a scene in the next route where Eleanor's and Lisa's relationship comes to a head.
yes.
Because a visual novel is like with multiple routes takes those routes into consideration.
Yes.
then there's like a gradual build-up, and unfortunately, the build-up here doesn't actually end up having a complete climax. But I guess you have to leave something for
Well,
the.
they try to compensate for it because they do know that it's impossible to tell everything through one
Of
book, so
course,
they add stuff on top of it.
of course, but they also have to leave something for the newcomers to read.
Yes. And Machina breaking through space-time is the best thing ever.
See, because we had like we had episode 8, which was my episode.
Yes.
We had episode. There was this episode, which was your episode.
Well, I mean, I have already seen a few more episodes, and if he does it every single time he enters the scene, then I'm a happy camper.
Yes, you are.
Even if his mech skeleton is not as good as it could
Yes,
have been.
it's very plain, unfortunately.
Yes, in the perfect world, it would have had a tiger's head at least.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
Anyway, a good episode, a bit drawn out at times, but it's better than taking stuff out, I think. And it has enough weight behind one of the most important scenes of the route.
Mhm.
And that leaves episode 11, which was the last episode of the
TV air,
TV
airing, yes.
airing of the anime. It's called Apoptosis. It begins with Mercurius slithering into Shiro's mansions and telling him about apoptosis. While
Yes.
Shiro looks around Rusalka's soul for her unenerbe and then popping out like a phoenix of sorts.
Or a chest burster alien, as it were.
Yes, at least we didn't get that CG animated. Then
least
we
that.
move on to Shiro's fight with Wilhelm because that's what they do. And as one might have guessed from the appearances of Eleanor and Machina, we also get Schreiber's appearance, uh, who does things to Rusalka and Wilhelm. And that's basically where it all ends for now.
Yes.
Alright, so first and foremost, I don't think it was a good place to cut the anime.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't a good place to put it to be continued. It wasn't. It didn't have the suspense needed
Yeah,
to like hold our interest. It wasn't a good place to stop. It was obvious that it wasn't an artistic decision. It wasn't a directional decision.
yeah, they did
It
have
was a
a recap episode aired after it, but it wasn't really
it
the
was also
same.
it also landed on like New Year's.
Yeah,
So
like Christmas.
yeah. But yeah, it wasn't a good place. It definitely wasn't a good place to stop. Then again, I don't know if the next episode would have been a good place to stop either. But it was
I
obvious.
think last episode was fine.
Maybe. But either way, it was obviously a technical constraint
Yeah,
or
yeah.
a time constraint more than a directional decision. But what can you do? But onto the episode itself. The first scene was good. The first scene was good, and it actually, at an instance, this scene actually, or a scene similar to this, actually happens in Rhea's Root.
Yes.
Except it doesn't happen to Rusalka inside Rusalka's inner world. It happens inside Wilhelm's inner world. Now, this is something that the anime added because we could speculate that what happens in Rhea's Root to Wilhelm probably happened to Rusalka in
Yeah,
Paris.
even if it's not really the same thing, because Wilhelm has a whole different Annenerbe, which works
Yes,
differently,
yes,
and it's more difficult to take control of it.
yes. But either way, we get to see like the Rusalka's inner world, which is actually designed around the Chetta Castle, which is the castle where Elizabeth Bathory imprisoned and tortured many girls and was later imprisoned
And
in
apparently
herself.
Rusalka is in the role of the tortured girl rather than Bathory
Or
herself.
rather, reminder: Elizabeth Bathory was actually uh, locked inside her own
Oh,
castle.
yeah, right, right.
So she's actually in the role. In my opinion, she's more in the role of Elizabeth Bathory after she was tried and convicted, which is very fitting because Rusalka was, or rather, when she was Anna, was actually convicted in the witch trials.
Yes.
And was about to be put to the torch. So yeah, that was a good one. We also had more origin story for Shiro and Ren. What led him to basically what led Shiro to kill Kasumi's father, which was done to defend Ren. And basically Reinhardt explaining the concept of an apoptosis. So no,
Not
that's
Reinhardt.
that's a hmm?
Not
uh,
Reinhardt.
Mercurius.
Yes,
Pardon. Mercurius explains that aspect. So, that's a very, and we also have a shot of Mercurius and Shiro, which is very fitting. And then we have the scene in the church with Rusalka and Rhea. I'd rather not talk about this scene.
Well, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Let's put
It
it that
definitely
way.
wasn't. No, I'm just kidding. But yes, Rusalka teases, taunts Rhea, um, starts attacking her, even though they're forbidden from laying a hand on her,
Yes.
and is actually saved by by a passing by Ikemen in a
Yes.
way, as Rusalka has her on an herbe pillaged from the inside, and Shiro bursting out of her body in a very painful fashion. Excuse me.
Yeah.
This battle is later. Now, of course, that scene is also interrupted before he even manages to do that. Their conversation is interrupted by Wilhelm, who, as we find out, is actually really pissed that Rusalka stole his skill, and that's
Yeah,
about
it was
it.
actually something that we didn't mention before. That when he learns about it from Trifa and stuff like that.
Yeah, which we actually mentioned, I think, in the last podcast. This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
actually a
we
very
did
interesting
it last
scene.
time, but not this time.
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting scene where Wilhelm calls out Trifa for what he did to Wilhelm,
Yeah.
for what he did to Spinning.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we have Shiro's rebirth, as we say, and he attacks and he fights against Wilhelm.
Yes.
We
Who
also get and
has
we
actually his sister for some reason.
Yes, they had to show her, I guess,
Yeah,
because
but
she.
they already did in episode 0, so I'm not sure
Yes,
they
but
had
it's
to
not.
show her
It's
here.
not. It's not actually explained, is what I would say, but it doesn't actually make sense to the new viewer either. People were actually rather baffled by
Yeah.
that revelation because the visual novel does a really good job of going into the little details of Wilhelm's birth. The anime doesn't do that, and that's a shame.
Yeah.
It's also worth mentioning that the Helga we see isn't actually Helga.
Yes.
It's actually the form is Relic takes, the Adenirbe takes. That's the form that the Dark Gift, as it's called, takes. But with the explanation being that the Dark Gift's compatibility with Wilhelm is so high that the Relic actually, in a manner of speaking, loves Wilhelm, and
Yes.
in so doing, it took the shape of the woman that loved him the most. At least at the time when you received the relic. And then we have Schreiber showing up, and this is where the anime actually ended up being censoring some bits, because the final scene where he appears before Shiro. Well, he appears before. Let's go by order.
Yeah,
He
so
appears.
we first of all see Schreiber's skeleton,
Yes,
and it was actually the most impressive of them all.
yes, because it
Not
had
only
hair.
because of how it itself looks, and it really is pretty cool, I have to say, but also because the scene itself was laid out in such a way that you uh, are much more impressed by this giant beast than with a mech who just walks.
Yes, because yeah, because you don't exactly expect him to show up. You're invested in Shiro and Willem's Bound. It's only
Yeah.
Schreiber appears and steals the show with his very characterized individual skeleton.
Yes.
And then we see that a bit before that, he arrives in the church. Rusalka begs him to help her, and he's saying that she loves him to gain his favor. And he, in his deranged manner, kills her out of love, or at least attempts to. He chokes her as she is slowly and painfully dying. And the next time we see them, Schreiber is holding her decapitated head and basically telling her to die already so he can avenge her. The
Yes.
visual novel was actually more graphic. Well, not graphic, but the description was more graphic.
Yes.
The visual novel, he repeatedly beats her head against the concrete, telling her to die already. And afterwards, I believe in the chapter following that, he also uses her head as a telegram of sorts to
Yes.
Shiro,
As a messenger.
as a messenger. Yes, where it sings marching cadences and then blows up spectacularly. So yes, Rusaka actually ended up getting a somewhat less gruesome fate in the anime.
But before that, he kills Wilhelm as well.
Yes, it does, and that was something that actually made the fans be very surprised because there was actually an interview with Kazuko Bay reference there. You
Yeah.
actually, in his last moments, he recalls Claudia, the heroine of Interview with Kazuko Bay, and you can actually see her mouthing the words Metosola, which is a motive in
Yeah,
Interview with
we'll
Kazuko.
just leave it at that here.
Yeah.
And I'm not actually sure we needed it. I wouldn't mind having an Ikabe reference, but I'm not sure this was the one I wanted. I would have expected like a more deliberate flashback about uh, mm, uh, Claudia or some other events that took place in
Well,
Ikabe.
I kind of do appreciate the gesture of him of Claudia flashing before his eyes before he
Yeah, yeah.
dies. It's like because she was his first love. Um, but I don't know. I feel like this is. I'm actually not opposed to this. I feel like if you want to insert fan service for the fans,
Yeah,
this
this was
kind of
a pretty harmless way to do it.
it was an honest, it was a good way to do it, and it actually went over well. The fans loved it. So
Yeah, and I suppose the last thing to mention here is that the way Wilhelm is killed is pretty different this time.
yeah,
As
he gets eaten by the skeleton.
yes, and in the visual novel he is pierced by the cross, I believe, taken from the church itself.
Is it? Are you sure you're not confusing it with?
I think it is. Like, I remember thinking, oh, it's the same way as in the Kasumi route.
Okay, maybe. I don't
Well,
remember. It's
basically,
been years.
it happened pretty fast, so it didn't
Yeah,
really matter.
yeah.
And that was all we had to deal with until the last 6 episodes aired.
Until this Sunday.
Yes, until this Sunday. And overall, these first 12 episodes. Uh, like, if we had to summarize it all, like, I would say it went actually pretty well. Like,
I'd
there
say
are, like,
I'd say it was a ride. It was a ride, I'd
yes,
say.
certainly. But if you go back and listen to our impressions, we didn't really uh, mm, pull our punches, so to say. But still, we only had like 3 to 4 bad to mediocre episodes, and the rest was pretty good. The main problem was again the direction and the fact that we had only 2/3 of the overall story, and we had to wait half a year to get to the end of it, which was even worse if you didn't read the visual novel because you thought
The anime,
that's when the
that's
anime
where it
ends.
ends.
Yes,
That's where it ends. What?
I
Nothing's
did
been
see some
resolved.
questions like, what new episode? I thought it was over. And this miscommunication is basically the main problem of the anime, I
It
think.
was actually a miscommunication, mostly on the English speaking side.
Well, yeah, yeah,
It was like they definitely made it known in the Japanese side, but I think it was both the fact that this project was aimed towards the Japanese audience and not so
yeah,
much
yeah.
towards the English audience, as well as I do think there was also a degree of disinterest because people didn't like the anime, so they like didn't bother to look into it.
Yeah.
But you know,
Well, at least now that the last 6 episodes are out and people are actually pretty happy about them, I would hope that people can
the
go back
Japanese
and appreciate.
The Japanese fans are pretty happy about them. I've actually the most I've seen, and I'm gonna be this might be a bit direct of me, but the most I've seen from most of the English fans was actually a lot of bitching about the last 6 episodes. But we'll leave that for
I
next
know
week.
I have seen some discussions that are saying, "Oh, this is actually good. I didn't expect it to go in this direction."
Well, I guess we'll see.
Yeah,
Maybe I've just been seeing the wrong discussions. Well,
maybe.
either way,
Either way, we will discuss the last 6 episodes next time. And now that
some
we
questions.
yes, now that we are done with our main topics, we will answer your questions and wrap it all up. So, today we got about 7 questions. We have
Uh,
already answered
answer.
Dorpai's uh, question about the Amaterasu, and we can move on to uh, questions from Twitter
Abdul
user
11. Abdul 11.
Abdu11. Yes. So, his first question is, why was the throne system created in the first place?
We don't know.
Basically, yeah.
We don't know. That's one of the big questions. We may very well learn about it very soon, since it's probably has to do like very soon in terms of very soon into Dies Irae Pantheon story, because it has a lot to do with World Zero, which is where Mithra, the first goddess, came from. So we will find out. It's one of the big questions that will be resolved in the Assyria Pantheon. There are only theories. We
Yes,
don't know.
we have the theory that it was made to control the
Rep-
people and it was made as a weapon, basically.
yes, and the new theory that popped up is that it was made to repel whatever enemy we will be fighting in the Assyria Pantheon. But again, we don't know.
Okay, so question number 2. How did Ren's Taikyoku reach 100 in Kajiri Kamui Kagura? What are power
Oh,
levels?
oh boy, yes. Let me preface this in general by saying that I feel like a lot of the discourse in in the English side of with the English speaking fans has kind of been poisoned over the years due to a lack of decent translation, due to a lot of bad translations that have been floating around the internet. The most glaring one of them being the Versus Battle wiki.
Yes.
And because now the thing, Taikyaku levels are a thing, of course. They appear in the Kajiri Kamui Kagura art book as a stat, because there's like a stat distribution, kind of like in the Dies Irae art book. The English art book has stat distributions as well, and so does the Kajiri Kamui Kagura one. And one of the levels that appear is actually indeed Taikyaku level. My big problem with discussing Taikyaku levels is that the numbers don't actually mean a lot.
Yeah.
They don't mean anything. Now, how did Ren's Taikyaku level reach 100? I assume you're asking how Ren became more powerful compared to what he was in Dies Irae. In that regard, I think I can think of a few theories. The first one being that the Ren you actually see in Kajiri Kamui Kagura isn't actually the same as Ren in Dies Irae, but rather a Ren that was resurrected by Ari in the throne. Basically, the throne allows whoever controls it to access the powers of other gods. So one theory is that when Mari summoned Reinhard, Mercurius, and Ren to help her defend herself against Hajun, she actually accessed throne memory and kind of recreated them. So there's the possibility of this Ren actually being a recreation, which would make him a little different compared to who he was in Dies Irae.
Yes.
The other one is that this isn't so much Ren that we're talking about in Kajiri Kamui Kagura as it is Yato. Now, that's his name in Kajiri Kamui Kagura. Now, Yato, when he appears in the end of Kajiri Kamui Kagura, has some circumstances surrounding him. He actually spends the majority of the game in a dormant state, and he actually gets awakened in the end because one of the other characters performs a resurrection ritual on him. Which is the same ritual used to resurrect Reinhard in the transmutation of the gold. So there's the possibility that he was basically buffed at that battle, which is why he was much stronger. And another matter is that simply there were less gods around. He had complete control over the region he was in, and there were no Hover Ado gods capable of challenging it, because it's also true for Bria, because, for example, Wilhelm, the more people are inside is Bria, when he activates it, the weaker it becomes, because it conflicts with other laws. Since there were no other laws to conflict, and the main characters of Kajiri Kamui Kagura are actually transcendence gods, they're not hegemony gods.
Yes.
There's a possibility that was a factor as well. But in general, I don't like talking numbers when it comes to Shinza, because it's not so much a matter of numbers in Shinza. It's a matter of concepts. It's a matter of cravings. It's a matter of how old, ancient, and encompassing your craving is. So, that's what basically what decides the fight. Now, and of course, the quality of your soul, that's also a factor. But I generally just don't like discussing numbers.
Well, still, I did expect to get some question like this, so I'm glad it got answered. Anyway, so next question. How is Ren alive in Kajiri Kamui Kagura despite Mercurius being dead?
Like I said, there's the possibility of him being not exactly resurrected, but summoned by throne memory. So in that regard, he would be generally separate compared to this. There's also the possibility. There's also possibly a remnant of Mari's throne still holding him, of Mari's rule still holding him in existence, allowing him to exist independently of Mercurius.
Yeah. Alright, so next one. Will Mercurius' backstory and true name ever be revealed in the future?
Hopefully it will in Pantheon.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised if it won't, because it's just...
Yes, yeah.
That's how he works.
Yeah, we don't know. I would assume that the circumstances behind his existence would be explained, but keep in mind that there may very well not be a story to tell. You might as well, because from what we know, Mercurius either came into existence from another reality, or was somehow brought into existence entirely to counter Satanael. So we don't know.
Yeah. Uh, if nothing else, I do expect Narcos Sensei to do something with him.
Perhaps.
And last questions from Abdu11. What is malignant tumor apoptosis source craving?
Okay. Malignant tumor apoptosis is actually the name of Shiro's Bria, of Shiro's Taikyoku, as it's called in Kajiri Family Kagura. And it's basically we do actually see it in Dies Irae. It's in the Mitsudomo ending,
Yeah.
which is what he pretty much uses to attack Reinhard and Mercurius. Um, and yes, what's the source craving? We can only speculate. Uh, one there are probably several theories going on there. One of them is that a desire to no longer feel for knowledge, which is very interesting because it's actually very similar to Mercurius and Reinhard in that regard.
Yeah.
Another one is probably a desire to always run alongside and run counter to Ren because of his desire to be because of his status as Ren's foil. And since Ren is ascended to godhood, it means that it also gives him the power to counter gods. Now, it's worth noting that in general, when he uses this power, it always puts him in equal footing to the person he's facing, no matter how strong or weak they are. So if he's facing a god, his attack actually gets boosted to the point where it's just as deadly as the god he's facing. So yeah, the craving is probably something that has to do with Shiro himself. I believe it has to do with his relationship to Ren. We don't have a direct quote. We don't have a direct explanation. But we know enough about Shiro to speculate that it probably has to do with his relationship with Ren.
Yeah. Alright, and the last question of the day is from Emperor Emma, who asks, do you reckon that Senshin Khan will play any role in Pantheon?
Yes, and he also said it would be very awesome if we had Rose included.
Yeah, I'm not
Um,
sure who it is, but okay.
yeah. Okay. So Senshinkan is a topic in and of its own. It's an entirely different setting, and any relationship between it and Shinza is, as far as we know, nothing more than like, pardon, it's nothing more than like references.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know. There might end up being some kind of collaboration. I can definitely see the Rose being kind of like the Hado gods. Kind of, the Rose are still, in my opinion, weaker than the gods because the Rose are still fundamentally human. But that's about it. I think there might end up being a collaboration, kind of like in Fate Grand Order, how you have collaborations with other Type Moon works. But
yeah.
other than that, I don't think so. I don't think there'll be a direct story relation.
Yeah. Alright, that's it. We have talked for about 2 hours and a half, and I think it's
There
about
was a
time
lot to talk.
we wrap
There
it
was a
up.
lot to talk about
Yeah.
this.
Alright, so don't forget to send us your questions. We are always happy to answer them. And we also are always grateful for any feedback on the format of our podcast. If you think it's too long, if you think we come out too often, we can adjust to your liking as we can do it whenever, basically. And if you have some topics that you want us to discuss, we will be glad to discuss them as well. It will probably be after the next episode because next episode will be dedicated to the last 6 episodes of the anime. But after that, we don't really have any uh, topics we want to discuss as soon as possible. So whatever you offer us will take precedence. Alright, so it's about time we say goodbye. I hope to see you next time, and it was Sinro Whiteline and Zach. Hey,
Bye.
bye bye.